Hey, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I am Sheree Burton. This is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Today, I've got some good stuff in the works with Sarah Skeem and Mindy DeGraffenried, a sister team who are amazing at looking at the stars and charts and kind of showing us, hey, what's happening behind the scenes? What's going on in the cosmos? What's causing all of this immense shifting happening in the planet? It's just fascinating to me that really there's an alignment going on that is affecting our bodies because of the planetary bodies and where they're sitting and how they're impacting all of the change that we see happening on the earth, both within and around us. So sisters Mindy DeGraffenried and Sarah Skeem actually started out life coaches, mothers. Some of them have done childbirth instruction and doula work. They're both entrepreneurs. One of them has survived a major disease. But it all started shifting when they started studying their astrological birth charts. So they started becoming acquainted with their unique place in the universe and their inherent values. So they got excited about bringing that same tool as astrological coaches to others so they can assist us in our own journey of releasing self-judgment, deconstructing cultural programming, discovering our latent attributes, and consciously expressing our true souls. So we're going to talk today kind of about like the difference between astronomy and astrology, this whole 2020 trifecta that's going on, which is about 3 planets that have aligned, and it's actually super rare. And also how this awakening of the feminine plays into what's showing up in our planetary alignment. I want to remind you to go to Women Seeking Wholeness on Facebook and join us there for some more in-depth discussion. And remember my Feminine Boss School, which is a 12-week course in goddess confidence, finding your soulpreneur path and balancing it all with home and family. So that is at femininebossschool.com. Now, this discussion that Mindy and Sarah and I have, it's a little longer, but it's super meaty, and I think you're going to love it because we go into some great detail about all this fascinating heavenly alignment stuff. Mindy and Sarah, the Power Sister Team, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have to tell our listeners, you guys just went over my natal chart with me, which people have gone over my chart with me before many times. Well, not many, like 3 or 4 different practitioners and healers and educators in this arena of astrology / astronomy, which has always been super fascinating to me. But the way you guys put it together, I was just like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And it was just beautiful and validating. I think, you know, Mindy, I've known you for many years. Sarah, both of you guys came to my last retreat. And so I know your hearts, and I know that you're taking this on in a very soulful sort of beyond mission, like, hey, like this is our calling. This is our calling. So maybe Mindy, why don't you share with our listeners sort of, and then we'll move to you, Sarah, how this called to you, because I know you're a fellow Mary Magdalene enthusiast like me,
yes.
And beyond enthusiast, like we feel really called to her. But share with our listeners sort of how this found you and why you're doing this work.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting journey, specifically in relation to the Mary Magdalene piece, because the Divine Feminine has been such a huge part of my soul since the time I was a child. I knew Mary as a child, even when she was never spoken of. I knew her. And so as I've moved forward and had this call to step into astrology, there's been a little conflict in me. I've actually thought, gosh, should I be doing more specifically in relation to the Divine Feminine and Mary Magdalene? And as I step into it more and more, I do feel like it is actually fulfilling that. She walks with me, and I do feel as if this is a way that I can be a voice to connect and to help others to awaken, to step into their true selves, into their divine feminine beauty and power. It's something that in my family and our upbringing, we've been truth seekers, self-analyzers from the beginning. My grandma was, she used personology. Don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of that. No.
So it's a study of facial features and hands and hair and things like that. It's fascinating. And it is actually the closest to astrology. So that's kind of fun to create that link. But she used that in marriage counseling. Huge blessing for people. And then my mom taught the color code. We studied Enneagram and Strengths Finder and,
Love it.
all of those.
I'm like that. Like that's how our family was too. So
yeah, we
my sisters. Yeah.
So then when I was introduced to astrology, it just fit, right? It fit into that world, but it took me so much further because, as you know, like you've experienced, so many of those are like little tests that you take, right? You take your color code test. And if you're anything like me, I want it to be more fun. So I just figured if I answered D more often, I'd be more fun because I knew that would give me more yellow scores. And so most of those we figured them out. We get our results based on our own answers, therefore our own baggage, our own perceptions, the constructs that we've grown up in. And so with astrology, where that is not calculated by our own subjective answers, that to me was exciting.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. It's like living scripture. It's like, where are all these planets? What is happening? You cannot deny this.
Yes. So that was when I was introduced to it, it just lit me up. And so that's been a couple of years now. And I've taken some courses and just been studying and playing in it. And it's been a huge blessing within my own home, in my personal life. And hopefully it'll bless others. So
for sure. And I just know your soul. So I get you. And Sarah, I got to know you during my retreat last year. And I just never put you guys as sisters. First of all, one of you has dark hair, one of you has red hair. And you look so different. And so it even threw me off when we got on our Zoom today. I'm like, wait, who are you? Wait, what? Okay, yeah, you're sisters. Okay, all right. And you're the Sarah that I remember. So both of you are so beautiful. And I love you. And I get your soul too, Sarah. But share with us your journey.
Well, it's interesting the way that Mindy described hers, that connection with Mary Magdalene coming from such a beautiful, light place. I would say mine came from the opposite. Mine came from a very dark place. And I'm going to get real with you here.
I love it.
I have struggled with the worst self-esteem my whole life. From the beginning of time, my self-hatred knew no bounds, and it colored every action or lack of action in my life. And I made progress over the years. I've done a lot of work, a lot of learning about my thoughts and about my feelings, about my own power. That stuff has really helped me a lot. But when I saw my chart and I started learning about what the stars said about who I was, and my chart expressed that pain, that wound, that hurt. And for some reason, seeing that it wasn't my fault, I'm not a bad person, and I'm not a bad person because I feel these things, but it was an expression in my chart. And I realized this is real and there's work for me to do here. This is one of the cards that I've been dealt. And while it is so difficult for me, now I can see it as something that's been given to me so that I can heal it and I can help heal other people who struggle with this similar problem or whichever card they've been dealt that has dragged them down their whole life. That we can see when we look at that chart, this isn't me being bad, this isn't me being stupid, this is here for me.
I just want to interject something that I feel called to share. My sister that we lost to suicide, Shauna, she was born with holes in her heart and had open heart surgery at age 5. She had severe scoliosis, and at age 14 had a full spinal fusion and was in a neck brace. And then she had bipolar as well, was diagnosed with bipolar in her early 20s. And so it would be really interesting for us to look at her chart, but we can look at that later. But she was in the darkness, like almost from the beginning, but lots of beauty and light as well. Like, and I see that in you too. So it is interesting how we carry these characters. It's almost like a destiny, but it's not set in stone. It's malleable, but yet it's undeniable and also very validating, right? Mm-hmm. To see, like you said, when you got your natal chart done, it put the pieces together for you.
Exactly.
So then you felt a call to just explore that in more depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is like the idea that all of us are, I love the word mutable. This comes down to choice, and hopefully we'll get into this a little bit more, but the way that Mindy and I view astrology comes down to choice. What do we do with the hand we've been dealt? And it's very empowering to see it that way.
Yes. And when I talk about destiny, it's like, this is what could potentially evolve. Mm-hmm. And here is, like you said, it's all about free will and choice. And if we step, and then what you guys were sharing with me about my chart happening right now, it's like, hey, you either step up or you don't. And, I love the aspect of freedom.
Yes.
And that is what my soul, and I think most souls are crying for right now, is finding that and knowing that it's not set in stone, but we have the ability to carve that stone in a way that is beautiful and unique to each one of us. So let's just dive into like, what in the hell is happening in this world? Like, we're in Hades right now. Like 2020 is just, and I told you guys, I've talked to a lot of different thought leaders and spiritual people and activists and educators of all types, healers. And they've all mentioned the planets in some way, shape, or form. They've all said, just look at what's happening in the stars right now. But this is my first discussion where we will really get into what it is showing, where the planetary alignment is. So let's talk about that.
It is a big deal, and I think it's hilarious just the way that you phrase that, of course, because it is hell. It feels like we're living in hell, right? There's so much craziness going on, and we're experiencing so much darkness being pulled up, right, to our view. We're seeing so much. And it does have to do, we see an influence with the way that the planets are aligned. So I'm going to step back a little bit and just do a quick astronomy, astrology moment. Astronomy is the study of the actual placement, the planets themselves. So we would study, what is the atmosphere on this planet? Where is it located? How far away is it from this? It's very scientific. Whereas astrology is the study of the influence of those things on us. And so I like to make the comparison. We're both really big into essential oils and holistic healthcare and things like that. And one of the things that helps me to understand that is when you think of, when we've worked with someone who maybe comes to us with severe neck and shoulder pain, that is physical. They're feeling it physically in their bodies. That to me would be astronomy. We're talking about the actual physical structure. But Cherie, both you and I know that might actually be because of the burdens that they're carrying, right? It's that the influence of some issues, some things in their lives that are weighing heavily on them. And so that's the astrological part. It feels a little more ethereal, but it is that influence, and it is real.
Yeah.
So Sarah has some information really specifically about these three big planets that are aligned: Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn.
Yes, I love it. And I love that you made that distinction between astrology and astronomy, because it is often exploited. It is, there's some wackos out there. Like, I mean, you know, they're posing as, you know, and it's so broad that you can almost insert anything into it.
And it can be confusing.
Yes, there is conflicting stuff. So, okay, yeah, let's hear about these three planets.
Okay, well, as Mindy mentioned, the three planets that have really been playing out this year are Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. And throughout history, when Pluto and Saturn in particular have their dance, they will have different relationships with each other because they're circling the sun at different speeds. So sometimes they're next to each other, sometimes they're across from each other, sometimes they form a square to each other. And during those times, there is an increase of their energetic power on the earth and in our lives. And some of the examples of those times are the First World War, the Second World War, September 11th, the Black Plague. The list goes on and on.
Man.
Or, exactly, you can feel it, right? And I want to read you a quote, if that's okay.
Please.
Because there's no way I can say it as well as this guy said it. Now, he wrote this book. This is Richard Tarnas. He wrote this book roughly 15 years ago. So it was after September 11th, way before this has happened. But this is the way that he describes the connection between Saturn and Pluto, which we've been experiencing this year. Now, tell me if this feels familiar to you. Okay, so this is a time of profoundly weighty events of enduring consequence, violence and death on a massive scale, the irrevocable termination of an established order of existence, collective intensification of division, antagonism, and hostility, the deployment of massive, highly disciplined, carefully organized destructive power, and a widespread sense of victimization and suffering under the impact of cataclysmic and oppressive forces of history.
Whoa.
Pretty intense, right?
That's exactly. When was that written?
About 15 years ago. So this is the energy that has been playing out in our world right now. So just to break it down a little bit, Pluto is the planet that digs up the deep stuff, the yucky stuff. And the purpose for that is hopefully transformation. But without consciously opting into transformation, it can just be exposing really, really deep wounds. And it can be very painful if we don't consciously activate our healing powers. So that's been going on for all of us. And at the same time, we've got Saturn, which can be very constrictive. So think all of us being put into our homes, made smaller, made solitary, isolated. That's super Saturn. We've all been experiencing it, right? So we see that playing out in our country and in our world, but we also get to see it play out on an individual level. It's happening not just to the world, but it's happening to each of us. And it happens to each of us in a different area of our life. So one example is Mindy and I have a brother-in-law where we call it the Trifecta, these three planets. When we look at his birth chart, they land in his house of work. And during these months, he has been under the most insane pressure at work. Everything has been falling apart. It's been downright traumatic. It's affected his health, his marriage, everything, because this trifecta has shown up there in his life. And so everyone is experiencing it somewhere else. We talked to you about yours showing up in your second house.
Which remind me what that was again.
Well, that's the house of your resources. And the reason that it was especially applicable to you is because that's where your son was, the who you are part. And so you're working on yourself. The Pluto has been revealing more about who you are and the work that you're meant to do.
But the significant thing that you were sharing with me about Pluto is it's a very slow moving planet, right? And it takes longer to circle this
Right.
time. And during this time, and I can't remember how many years you said, but it was a lot.
248 for Pluto.
So that means that Pluto hasn't been in this position in our world for 248 years.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Saturn
paired with Saturn and.
Correct. And that's where we see a little bit of that difference. So when Sarah threw out those incredible examples, Saturn moves in about a 30-year cycle. So Saturn will come up against Pluto fairly often. Well, not often, 30 years. But every 30 years, when they come together, when they have these different connections in the heavens, we will see big events on Earth. We experience those in very physical ways.
What was the third planet? Saturn, Pluto, and
Jupiter. And Jupiter makes everything big. It just is like a magnifying glass. And most of the time we look at that as a really good thing. It's expansive. It's considered the planet of luck. And wherever that is for our personal lives, it's an invitation for us to play big, to step in and take risks. Here it is with these two planets. And it could really go either way. It can blow this thing up huge, which we are experiencing. It could be an invitation for us to step in, as you've been doing, Cherie, during this time. You've been in massive creation and digging into yourself. You've stepped into it in such a healthy way. There are going to be many who don't. And it could feel too big.
Right. What I'm particularly interested in right now is the dissolution of structures. Mm-hmm. Do either of you want to speak to that? It's a big can of worms to open, but I don't even care.
Well, it is exactly as Sarah was saying. You bring Saturn. Saturn is the planet of structure. And you throw that right on top of Pluto, the planet of deconstructing. It is the planet of taking things apart. That is exactly what we're doing. We are deconstructing the structures that are currently in place.
Yeah, and you can see it in literally every domain, government, yes. Academia. I mean, look at what's happening with schools right now. You can see it happening in religions, mm-hmm. This mass awakening or exodus, or I don't know even what you want to call it, within people, within our structures of our bodies.
Yes.
Things are coming apart. Yes. And yeah, so what is Jupiter? So Jupiter makes things bigger then. So here's the structures, here's the with Saturn, here's the deconstruction with Pluto, and then Jupiter just makes it like grandiose.
Yeah. It covers the entire Earth. I mean, we're experiencing it on as large a scale as we possibly could.
It is global, like it's hit everywhere.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys something, because I know that your computer program can show you with precision how many degrees and how long it will take for these transits to happen. So what's on the horizon in terms of this trifecta kicking all of our tails?
Well, we still have a little bit of time. Here, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and pull up I'm going to pull up your chart, Cherie, and I know this isn't...
Okay, I'm okay with being the guinea pig.
Yeah.
I've already told these ladies. Well, and my listeners know, like, things have been going down with me. Like, I almost got divorced last year. Like, I've had this huge transition from religious dogma into free spirituality and free, just my whole Gnostic connection and mystical mm-hmm. Christianity and everything just blowing open. And it's like, whoa. And then my health, has taken some interesting transitions, but I can feel it. Like the best word I have for it is evolution and emancipation, mm-hmm. like breaking chains. Yes. So yeah, bring it on. What's going down for me?
Well, just in general, they are moving, right? Like the planets are moving. They are called wanderers. Right. And so they won't stay in that position for long. Pluto does. Pluto will remain because it moves so slowly. So wherever it's found in each of our charts, it's going to spend some time there. So we're going to have some time in our personal worlds to be dealing with what is being brought up. So there's the global thing that we're seeing, but personally, we're digging up some of our own stuff. And we're going to have some time to do that. Saturn and Jupiter, they both move more quickly. And so they will start to spread out and move into some different places. Now, this gets a little nuanced because there's another phrase, another word called retrograde. You've probably heard retrograde.
Well, we've been hearing about the Mercury retrograde for a long time. We were in a Mercury retrograde.
Right. And what that is it's the appearance of the planet going backwards. It doesn't actually. But if you've ever been sitting in a parked car and the person next to you moves in a different way and you feel like you're moving, it feels like they're going backwards and it kind of plays a trick on your mind. That's what's happening. The planets, they appear to go backwards. And so we actually swing in and out a little bit. And so the planets will separate and then they'll come back together. It is going to feel pretty strongly connected until December. And then things start to shift a little bit into the earlier part of the year. And so we'll get to see some of those things spread out a little bit.
Like what kind of shift?
Well, okay, so let's look at yours. So when we look at, I'm going to look here, January.
That's my birthday month.
Yeah, things get exciting there. You've got your sun, your Jupiter, your Saturn, your Venus, and your Pluto are piled all together in January. So for you personally, you're going to have a lot coming to the forefront of your life because, again, this is going to be one of the other terms, right, is the solar return. The moment your sun comes back and lines up with your birth sun, that's your birthday. So January, your sun comes around all of these other planets. There's going to be a lot of energy for you personally in January. So, I've
got 6 months to gear up. Wait, no, I've got
not that much. My friend.
Okay, what are we in right now? We're in August. So 4 months. Yeah, that's right. So, globally, we are experiencing something that will be kind of interesting is that Mercury is going to come and join that trifecta in December. Oh, really?
So
and how will that affect things?
Well, we could perceive things. We might actually see more, which is hard to imagine. There's so much already being exposed through the social media, things like that. There's going to be that expansion of communication. So it'll be interesting to see if we learn more about, I don't know, what's going on.
Maybe some of the things that have been hidden, like some of the more nefarious aspects to these structures will come to light.
Exactly.
That would be good.
Let's keep our eyes open.
And we will have a new president in the US. So that could fuel some fire.
Yeah,
for sure.
I want to ask you guys, and I didn't ask you about this when we were talking earlier, about the Chiron, the planet Chiron. Do you study much about that? Or do you know much about the Chiron return when somebody has a Chiron return?
Well, you definitely, Chiron is, as Sarah referred to earlier, that that one is generally in reference to your wound, right?
Yeah.
So it's this thing that you came into this world with. It depends on the way you look at things. If you believe in reincarnation, then it might be a wound that you brought from a previous life. If you believe in generational issues, it could be a wound that's coming through generational family lines, things like that. So when we have that Chiron return, you're definitely now addressing it. And if you don't, it can be kind of ugly. You really need to, what I was taught by Marilyn Light, who was my mentor and who did one of your first charts, was that generally that happens at about your 50-year birthday, right?
Which it totally did. Actually, age 49 for me.
Yeah, so it would have hit right about then. And if you haven't dealt with it, if you haven't in those first 50 years of your life, if you haven't really faced it, you will.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
gonna
It'll come
you.
cloaked in some way. Like it'll show up. It might just be in a form that you never like would recognize. It has to hit you. It has to. And for me, it was just literally like a whole undoing and an unbecoming of who I thought I was and what I thought I knew, which is the dark night of the soul, which I really went and dove deep into understanding what that means. But you could see it on my chart, which was crazy.
Yeah.
It was right there. Okay. So when we're talking about this map of the heavens and how ancient this was, like I was telling you guys, I see it as one of the feminine arts. And I think that's why there's such a resurgence of interest in astrology, because maybe it's the feminine version of the astronomy, right? Because the astronomy is all about structure and logic and science and practicality. And the astrology feels more feminine. It feels more like, hey, here's the nuances of what could be happening under the surface or underneath or below what's seen.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And one of my favorite parts about astrology, the way that Sarah and I are choosing to use this tool, is to awaken to the possibilities. There's so much available to us, and so often we aren't even aware of it. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to consider things that we had never thought of before. I love what you're saying. The feminine, absolutely. There's this beauty, there's flow, there's understanding, there's depth. So I'm grateful for that specific clarification.
It just didn't even occur to me until I just thought about it for a minute. It's like, oh, yeah. And
you know what?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, what comes up for me is the word hidden. And so often feminine energy is in the hidden place, right? And we feel it that way. It's often used negatively, keeping us hidden, keeping us invisible, which isn't the higher version of it. But it's okay to be in the dark. There's like a good version of the dark, right? The moon, representing the feminine, is always in the dark, right? And I mean, sometimes we see it in the day, but it's associated with the dark.
Depth.
And I think as like seeing this within that space, like this is the hidden part of your soul. It's been hidden from you your whole life. So often, especially as women, but for men as well, the culture, the religion, the family, those structures have imprinted their narrative onto us. Mm-hmm. And the who we are, the real self, tends to be hidden. And astrology gives us a peek into what is that real self. That is, it's not what everyone told you. It's not even what you thought it was.
Right.
So we try to open your eyes to it, give it, shine a light on those dark places and say, mm-hmm. Do you want to step into this? Do you want to play with this? Are you willing to try something different?
Yeah. Yeah. It's brave work to go into what's hidden versus what's handed to you.
Yeah. Can I give a little example?
Yeah.
And it might seem silly, but it's been a major blessing for me. My birthday's in May. I'm a Taurus, and I'm right on the cusp. So actually on my birthday, it changes to Gemini. Taurus is very earthy. It is very connected to the senses. Gemini is all in your head, lots of ideas, lots of change. It's a lot of movement. And I really spent my life in that space, in the Gemini space. It was more acceptable to live in ideas. And it wasn't until I experienced my chart and I sat with this idea of being Taurus, that I finally was able to step into something about myself that I'd been denying. And what's interesting is a lot of it actually plays out whether or not we step into it. So I've spent my whole life very sick, all sorts of severe health problems. And in a strange way, that is actually very Taurus. It's very connected to the body, and all of my experiences, all of the spiritual experiences, everything that comes into me is manifest through my body. Whether it's tears or sickness, it shows up. And that's very Taurus. And I never really honored that. And when I allowed myself to say, it's okay to be Taurus, it's okay to be still, it's okay to not be chasing a thought, a new thought every day, every minute of every day. I gave myself permission to try some different things on. In our home, we didn't value exercise. It just wasn't a thing. My dad was extremely sick, and my mom was holding everything together like the warrior woman that she is. But exercise got kind of thrown by the wayside. And so I grew up joking that it was against my religion. We just didn't do it. And recently, as I've really allowed myself to play in Taurus, I've started going to the gym. And it seems so simple, but I'd never done it before. And now my kids go. I've developed relationships because of it. My 19-year-old daughter and I go every day. My 5-year-old picks up the weights in the house and says, I'm going to be your trainer. I'm going to teach you. And it's just a whole new experience. And it's actually become a place where when I go to the gym, dare I say, I call it a temple. I'm able to slow down. I'm able to step into the stillness that honors that part of me that I've never allowed myself before.
And you had to move your body to get to the stillness.
I did.
I love it. Sarah, what is your birth sign?
I am Aquarius, so I naturally live in the thought realm. That's kind of my soul. But it is all about society and seeing where the structure of society can be better. And it's interesting how much that energy has been flowing through me my whole life, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a name for it. It just was. And so it's really interesting how the birth chart will show up. But that was for me, I grew up Mormon, and the thing that really changed my path was my Aquarius view, my ability to see kind of the forest through the trees and see those larger structures and how they were impacting the individual. And so it's just really, really interesting how, whether we're conscious of our chart or not, very often that energy is going to affect you. And that's one of the gifts of going to an astrologer, is to find out where that energy is flowing to you so that you can consciously make it flow well instead of against you or in a way that is hurtful or harmful to you.
Right. I love how both of you as astrological coaches, you have, I'm just going to read this here. You're taking people on their own journey to release self-judgment, deconstruct cultural programming, discover latent attributes, and consciously express their true soul, which is awesome. I think what calls to me most about that right now is the deconstructing cultural programming, because the reason it calls to both of you is you had to do it. The reason that you're doing it for others is you had to do it yourself. So how has learning about astrology and becoming acquainted, I guess, with who you are as, I believe that souls intentionally choose the precise moment they incarnate with planetary alignment. I'm sure you guys share that belief as well. But how do you do that? How do you deconstruct cultural programming through astrology? By looking at your birth chart, I guess.
Well, it's
for me.
Go ahead, Sarah.
The first step is awareness. It is that seeing yourself almost as a map without all of your subjective baggage. You're looking at this page And while most people don't understand it, it's like a different language. It's there facing you. And it's saying, but actually, this is what you've been handed. And all of a sudden, you kind of have to face that. And you look at that and go, but I was always raised this way. So again, another personal example. My moon is Capricorn. That is not the most lovey-dovey moon.
Well, I know that's my sign. That's my son.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I have to really work at the, like, I'm actually
The
really
soft
compassionate.
stuff.
Yeah, I really am. But it's not what I lead with all the time. Like, I have to really consciously be like, okay, it's not business as usual, Sheree. You've got to look at, you know, but anyway, go ahead. I get it.
Yeah, so you get it. So that's my moon is, that's the mood. That's the love. That's the soft part of the self. And mine is Capricorn. Mine is this like structured, you know, achiever type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I've been kind of prickly my whole life and haven't done love very well. I haven't done relationships in a comfortable way. Like, people know we don't really hug Sarah. Like, that's her personal space. We don't hug Sarah. And there's been so much self-judgment on that point. Like, why am I not soft and cuddly to everyone? And then I saw my Capricorn moon and I learned about it. And I was like, oh, well, that's why. It's okay. It's okay. Now I know that I love a different way. I receive love a different way. You want to know one of the best ways to love a Capricorn moon? Time. Show up on time. Do what you said you were going to do. It is an expression of love. Yeah. And so now kind of deconstructing the idea of, well, what is love supposed to look like? Love isn't always hugs and kisses. Sometimes love is responsibility. And that's just one example of how knowing myself was outside of the cultural norm. And it's okay. Yeah. And now when my husband, because my husband has always been really good with time, oh, it is such a beautiful expression of love. And I can receive it as such.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And that makes me feel better too, because I'm a Capricorn. I forgot what my moon is. It's either Gemini or...
Yes, Gemini.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one, right? Like, it's got to temper my Capricorn somehow.
Well, it's funny, in what we use a system that's called evolutionary astrology, which simply means progression, right? The ability to change. Yeah. Gemini is, well, all of the signs, none of them are good or bad. So
I know. I get that. It's just like, please tell me it's a little more loving.
A little gentler. Well, it actually probably means that you might be a little moody. You might swing back and forth.
That's not good.
But
it's, it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be bad. And that's the beautiful thing, is it comes with a gift, which is Gemini is changeable, right? So what that means is sometimes you can really step into love. Yeah. During that time, you can feel it, you can experience it. And then other times you might be more thoughtful, more, airy in the headspace. And that can serve its purpose.
Well, I think with my structured Capricorn, having that Gemini in there, I love diversity. Like, I don't love homogenized ways of living and doing things. And I can definitely get into that, like, flip around. I can be with different groups of people. Like, I can sit with different energies and personalities and kind of flow with that chameleon type of thing. But I think what's probably happening, as I look at that with what's happening on the earth too, don't you think everyone's stuff is being magnified? Like, it's, for me, it feels like, okay, well, as a Capricorn, I like structure and predictability, and I love business, and I'm a natural high achiever and all of that. So I can see how my old structure, my old way, I could say, of doing business or looking at structures or people is definitely shifting. I'm not on the same track that I used to be in terms of wanting recognition and all of or just, achieving things in general. The only thing I really want to achieve is to wake people up.
which you're doing. And you just did a beautiful job of showing an example of how they all are gifts. There's a gift in all of them. And I think in going back to, your question about how to use this tool, I love what Sarah had just described. Awareness brings possibilities, and it also brings permission. There's that feeling a little validated in some of the areas of our life that we may have judged ourselves. And so if we can get into a place where we can step out of that judgment, oh my gosh, how much more can we do and be and feel if we are outside of that judgment? And Sarah and I like to call this mom eyes. I don't know if I've even used that with you, Cherie, but this phrase mom eyes, we love it because when we look at our own children, we can see when they've done something that maybe isn't quite right, or we can see maybe a health problem, or a physical flaw, or something that needs some assistance. It doesn't take away our love for them. It doesn't take away their potential. We have this ability to just gush love as moms, right? And we feel that way about these charts. We feel like we can step outside of any judgment, and we can look in and say, wow, look at all the possibilities. Oh, that's how you've been living? This might be why. Is that serving you, or is it not? Yeah. Let's consider some other possibilities. It's a beautiful thing.
And if you take one soul out of the whole universal design, really, it throws everything off. I mean, we are each needed in our, we dark, light, and in between, and whatever. There's no right or wrong in that. And I think that's what I've deconstructed right there. There is no actual black, white, right, wrong.
Yay. Yes. I'm so glad you said that. And this is one of the things I'm so passionate about with astrology is if you look at the chart, it's a circle made with 12 pie-shaped segments. All of them come together to create one whole, one full completion. And then each segment represents different qualities, different things that are needed. And we can see that circle representing the whole of one soul's journey, that for that person to become whole, they need to pass through, experience, and gain the qualities of each of the signs and each of the energies, as well as humanity as a whole needs every one of those energies. And so when we look at someone, let's say one of the signs that is the hardest for people to accept or to want to be around sometimes is Scorpio. Scorpio is well known as being
oh my gosh, I have a Scorpio child. I have a Scorpio child.
So right? There's that response.
He's turning 8, yeah. Oh, heaven help us. Okay, go ahead.
So we see that sometimes it's a struggle, right? I've got a daughter who's Scorpio. My husband's got a lot of Scorpio energy. And there's a tendency to kind of label that as dark or negative. It tends to be very suspicious. It sees the dark things in the world. It's got a special relationship with Pluto, which we've been talking about. But how would nature be? How would a human be if they didn't have that quality? The quality to look around and see the dangers, to be wary of threats. It's an essential part of the wholeness that we're all trying to achieve. And so when we talk to an individual, and let's say that they're Scorpio, they're not meant to feel bad about having that sign. It's a beautiful sign. It's an incredible sign. We've done a lot of studying on that sign in particular, because it is absolutely fundamental to the beautiful completion of the soul and of humanity.
And might I add, we all have them all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that is something we need to remember too. It isn't that I am this and you're that and we can't understand each other, and unfortunately that's something that I've experienced. Personally, I had an experience where somebody dear to me said she couldn't be a friend with this other person because they didn't belong to the same religion. And she said, we can't even understand each other. Why would we even do that? Oh, right? Oh,
that's anti-religion right there.
It is. It is. And it kind of breaks my heart. But the beauty of this is that we all carry all of these energies. We express them differently. We experience them differently. There is actually, again, that here you are, Cherie, women seeking wholeness. Yeah. There is a wholeness in each of us, and there's a wholeness in all of us.
Mm. Yeah. And just because I've been doing a lot of my shadow work over the last, I don't know how long, years, dipping in and out of that true, gritty, earthy, real, raw parts of myself that I would have literally spiritually bypassed in the name of being righteous or whatever. And I'm not talking about willful sin. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, if I'm going to become whole, if that's my quest is, well, we already are whole, but like, if I want to discover that, and Sarah, you mentioned just your struggle with self-deprecation and, heavy self-loathing. I've cycled through that as well. And it would sometimes just pop out of nowhere. Things would be going amazing. And I'd feel super connected in my relationships and my spiritual path. And then all of a sudden I'm just blindsided by absolute black self-loathing. And it's like, what? And again, in times past, I would have just prayed, fasted, run to, a healer or something, and just not even examined that because it was so dark. But now I'm learning the value of sitting with these different energies that kind of come to the surface and asking and climbing in and feeling it. And then doing the work to examine it. And the only thing I could say is just sitting with it. And I think that is what's happening with the planet, is this just literal unearthing of the violence and the ways we've looked at people's skin colors, gender disparity. I can definitely see it happening in religions with all of that, yeah. Which for me was, you know what? I'm too heavy in self-judgment in this space. It's not working for me to sit in judgment. And it wasn't until I went into the last episode of the deep self-loathing that I recognized that it was the attachment to that paradigm, that particular orthodox dogmatic paradigm, that was keeping me in a cycle of self-judgment that I could not get out of unless I took a sabbatical from that.
Yeah, and we're all feeling that. Maybe I shouldn't say that. We can't say all, but I think to some extent within each of us, we're feeling it in some way. Don't you think?
Yeah. Well, at least the people I talk to, they're either masking or denying that it's there and trying to spiritually bypass, and they're attaching to all these causes to feel better. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just going to call it out. I just see it happening. And there are many worthy causes out there. And so don't get me wrong. That's not, but everyone wants to picket for something right now. Everyone wants to hold a sign. Yes. And they're not going inside. I shouldn't say that either as a blanket statement, but really don't take your energy and project it out into something that's going to save a group. Do that for yourself, because that's, I think, what we're being asked to do.
Yeah, I loved the phrase you used, just like struck my soul. You said, sit with it, which I love, but I prefer, you said, climb in. Ooh. Like, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing with the chart. When we do a birth chart session, we climb in and we wait around, we splash, we marinate, we play in it, and we just get deep into ourselves, and we really do that inner work rather than putting, like you just said, all the energy outside of us.
Yeah. And we could even go into these places of feeling better than other people. And I can see that a lot of people are galvanizing and doubling down on we're more righteous, or we're better than this group, and we can see what's happening clearer than anyone else. And I see that happening not just in religious groups, but I see it happening in other types of, enlightened groups. There are people that are seeking enlightenment, and it's like, I don't mean to judge them for that, because it's easy to do, but really it's a solitary journey. That is the dark night. It's going into yourself and taking and parsing out what feels like illusion and what feels like truth. And so honestly, systems can't do that for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty of looking at your chart going, okay, all right, this is me. And this is how I'm moving and rolling, literally rolling, because I'm going around the sun and I'm hitting all these houses. And you guys shed some beautiful light on what's happening in mine and where I'm like front loaded or whatever on one of mine. And just, I'm amazed actually that I had already intuitively moved into, okay, I need to set a space for writing and I need to do it now. I need to do it right now. And like, oh, I need to let go of this goal that I had that like was so appealing like 2 months ago. And I could literally care less about it right now.
Wow.
And as I'm looking at my chart, it's like, oh, okay. Like I don't, even when and I know you guys can speak to this too. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, it's really helpful to have a structure of like, and look at like what's happening. Have you ever been challenged by like you're being a fortune teller, like you're wearing like the Madame Tussauds like crystal ball? Like, what are you doing?
Well, I'll just say
to the, because I'm telling you, that's what the patriarchy looks at this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll say from right out the gate, like I'm super skeptical, just generally speaking. So for me, it's what I love about it is it's so practical for the work. People, the more time you spend with it, you do start to get convinced, right? It
so
starts to get almost creepy. It's almost creepy. We have people that we go over stuff with them and they'll be like, whoa, like I knew that about myself, but I could never put words to it. And you literally just described it. And so it happens. It's very experiential, which I would say is also very feminine. But as far as the way that we practice it is really that it's meant to be a tool to help create greater freedom of agency, greater freedom of choice. And if it's doing that for you, if it's helping you make better choices, then it's working. If it's us telling you something about yourself that doesn't help you, then it's not working and I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So that's my
I like that. Okay, so that was my first question, so we can check that. And then my next question is, as you're looking at how things are playing out for the planets right now, where does the feminine fit in to all this? Can you see that on there? Like not just with my personal chart, but with the world, because I know it's in mine, but like I know where my planets are aligning with it, but where are you seeing it in the world?
Can I throw this out? And then I know Mindy is going to have something amazing because
go ahead.
Passion for the divine feminine. But I have been chomping on this since we got on this call, and I am just so passionate about this idea. So we've been talking about that deep dive going in. We talked about femininity being in that dark place. And Pluto, that's the big one. That's the big one that we've all been feeling, is that deep dive into our darkness. To me, that represents the womb. The womb is a very dark place. It's a very lonely, isolated place. It's not a bad place. It's just dark.
Yeah.
It's a place of creation.
They call that in mystic tradition, the dark mother, and everyone misconstrues what that means, but it is womb. It is still surrender, creation. Yeah.
Yes. So for me, when I see what's going on right now with this, what we call the 2020 trifecta, is we have this beautiful womb. It's an opportunity. It's terrifying if you don't know, right? It's just dark. You're alone in the dark, and it can be scary, and you're facing your demons in that space. But what it represents to me is with Saturn there is birth, okay? And I hope I'm not going to be too graphic here for you, but we have the birth canal. Saturn is tight. It's closed. We have to push through that tightness for this birth that is happening. What all of us are facing with these 3 planets together is the moment of birth, which is so dangerous, right? You either come out of it alive, new, with everything ahead of you, or you die. Like it's an either or here.
Yeah.
And this is the moment that we are all in, is birth. So are we going to be fearful? Are we going to neglect what's happening through spiritual bypassing or through whatever means we do, to our addictions, through whatever? Or are we going to step in and say, this is my moment. I'm going to push through the pain. I'm going to squeeze through the tightness that is Saturn trying to hold me back, trying to make me small. Or am I going to come out as Jupiter, big and bright and lucky and beautiful?
That is truly a rebirth. So we're in a rebirth cycle as a species, hopefully.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And just to add a little to that, because that was beautiful, and absolutely I agree. There's another point on our chart that is called the North Node. It's a node of the moon. It's not a planet, but we use it in our calculations, and it points to kind of the high point of our progression, the thing that we really have to step into in order to make it happen. It's not going to just happen. We really do need to do work to make it happen. And right now for the planet, we've got the moon, which we've just discussed as the feminine. And right next to it is Venus. Venus is Mary. Venus is Isis. Venus is the divine feminine. She is the beauty, right? And she's in Cancer. Cancer is the mother. It is the nurturing. And yet Cancer, the sign of the Cancer is a crab. It has a protective shell and it will be defensive. That is the goal. Right now, those are lined up right next to each other as that North Node, what we're working towards. So to me, that is all this that we're working on, all of the nitty gritty, icky, the stuff that we're doing,
basically
earthy stuff. Yeah, that's the goal.
I love that. I've been saying for a long time that we're all just energetically going, I want my mother.
Yes. That is so true.
and it's just, it's beautiful to see that's actually playing out. I think it's interesting that like you guys have been like doulas and childbirth instructors, and I know Mindy, you are a disease survivor. You're in it with your body, as you said.
Yeah.
What day in May, by the way, is your birthday?
20th.
Okay. My oldest daughter is a Taurus. She's born in May. Okay, so let's kind of pull this together as we kind of round out our discussion. And before we do, share with people how they find you online. I know that you're offering a special, and I hope you're ready to get inundated, because I'm sure my listeners are going to want their charts done now. Where can they find you? And then what are you offering to our listeners?
Yeah, so our website is wonderastrology.me. Because why not? It's all about me, right? It's all about us. And we're just really excited to step into wonder. We chose that name very purposefully, right? The awe and the wonder of the expanse of the heavens, going into that darkness and finding the lights. So right now what we have created is what we're calling the 2020 Trifecta. And so it's going to be a much smaller session. Our birth session is an hour and a half, and we spend a couple of hours preparing for that session. So we've got to do a lot of calculations and just working through it. And then we come together and we work with you. We do it through a Zoom conference call, and we discuss. So we don't just present in lecture style, we have a conversation, and then we send you some reports. So we've put together a lot of educational material, but also just personalized reports. So that's the birth chart. This 2020 Trifecta will be only about 20 minutes, and we're just going to be looking at where these big planets are playing in your life personally. So that's what we did with you, Cherie, before we got on.
It was awesome. I was just like, whoa, okay. I relate to all of that. And it was super validating just to know that it wasn't all in my head. This is what systems do to us. Yes. Systems make it so that we question our worth, and we question even the darkness showing up. It's like you're doing something wrong. If you're feeling darkness, you're doing something wrong. But when in actuality, it's it's in our nature, and it's part of our path to go into those spaces and examine them and be in them. And I was never taught that. I was taught to run from it. And when I say darkness, I don't mean, gosh, how do you even?
Evil?
It's like, evil. Okay. So it's the fertile, dark, rich soil of rebirth. That's how I see
creation. All is where creation happens. Yeah. Period.
It has to start with black and void. It has to.
Think of conception. I mean, go graphic. Conception, the act of sex generally, that we're talking dark. We go into the darkness. We go into that womb space, which we can think of it as scary and lonely, but it's also the most nurturing.
Yeah.
That's where we do so much of our healing.
This is where all the one of my great teachers in life, his name is Nithya Shanti. I've interviewed him on this podcast, and he's a former Buddhist tree monk. He lived that way for 6 years in his early days. And he taught me when I was going through a huge issue, I couldn't find solace anywhere. I was like, okay, the church is not bringing it to me. I do not know what is happening, but I am not getting fed here. I have no perspective other than to internalize it into myself and double down on spiritual practices because I'm doing something wrong. And he said to me something that just rocked my world. He said, Cherie, you can only find depth in darkness. And he's like, you are right on time. Like, he totally validated where I was at. He's like, when you're in the dark night, when you didn't precipitate it, it wasn't something you chose, it found you. And this is what I mean by what's happening on the earth right now. I see people like it's literally like tentacles trying to reach for people to say, climb into like you said, Mindy, climb in. You're safe. The earth has you. But there's all this fear right now around things are coming. Oh my gosh, like the signs and whatever. And I see that, but I also see like, there's literally a scripture in Matthew that says, in that day, men's hearts will fail them.
Yeah.
And so you've got to come into your body temple. You got to climb in, you got to be in your skin suit and live with it, be with it, and not deny it. So it's very temporary when it passes, but I'm finding I'm getting really feisty about it, actually.
If I may just throw in an image that popped in my mind as you said that, was a child climbing into their parent's lap. There's, the arms go around them and they're able to sit. They're able to be still in that place and feel safe and protected. And that's the hope, is that we can climb into that space for ourselves. Maybe we're holding our inner child. Maybe it's Mother Earth who is holding us and supporting us, but we're able to climb into that and feel supported and loved.
And that's what awaits us when we say yes to experiencing life. Yes. Versus just, here are the set of things you need to believe. Here is how you become righteous. Here is how you help people. Like, it's all handed to you. Don't look any further. And honestly, that does work for some people. For me, and I'm sure if you're looking at my chart, you're like, okay, no, it really does not work for you. No. Some people are called into this place of looking underground, looking below the veil, beneath the surface.
That's so beautiful. I mean, that's just divine feminine, right? Like, lift the veil. What she is.
And I thought she was something different than that. I thought she was just this white, blonde, blue-eyed, always dressing in white, serene, peaceful. This is what I was programmed to think she was. Mm-hmm. Serene, peaceful, placating, soft-voiced. being. And she's not. She's part of her. That's part of her, but
yeah,
so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, Shri, when I was at your retreat and you put a bunch of archetype cards all over the floor. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if you directed us to, look and see which ones you resonate with. And I was looking and looking, and I could not stop looking at the destroyer. And I really grappled. I was like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? What kind of sick person? And then the other one was femme fatale. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so drawn to these, I'm going to put air quotes, dark archetypes?
Mm-hmm.
But it really, really is what you're talking about. It's going into those dark places and destroying those things that are not serving us.
Yeah. It's almost like an Avenger. That's what you are.
Mm-hmm.
An Avenger. You should come up with your own idea of your outfit and everything. Mindy, you and I share the archetypes. We both resonate with Wonder Woman for that.
Yes.
Yeah. From the age I was a young girl, I was just enamored with her. It's man. Not necessarily the Linda Carter one, but I like the new lady.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yay, this is so cool. So we've got the feminine there. She's going dark on, she's been veiled for millennia.
Yes.
I think the emergence of her will be so liberating because it will be like, we can just be ourselves.
That's the goal.
Yeah. That's what I see, that North Node or whatever you're talking about. It's just let's just you be you, I'll be me.
Yes.
And we won't have a standard up there that's just so homogenized.
Mm-hmm.
It will be this beautiful, diverse tapestry of humanity where everyone is just I honor you for being you.
Yes.
And we're, as a species, we're just really having a hard, politics and everything. It's just such a mess. Trying to, in religions, oh no, this religion's right. Oh no, this one. Oh, this political party's right. Oh no, this one. Oh, this, this theory, this, that, this, whatever. And it's okay, all those things have to be examined right now because it's not a one size fits all.
Right. Right. But you've hit to the very core, and it's so simple. It is to cut away, say no to all of the diverging everything that confuses us, and to say yes to yourself.
Sarah, that was a brilliant thing that you shared about how these three planets are about birth and, the deep dive in the dark womb to hopefully birth something bigger and brighter. For someone who's listening, which I know I have a lot of listeners who are deep dive truth seekers, but for a woman listening who might just be in the thick of it, maybe she's just bedridden even because she's just feeling it in her body. Maybe she's going through a religious transition. Maybe she's going through a relationship transition. Maybe she's lost a lot. Maybe she's lost somebody to death, or even if none of those things are happening, I should say, she might be experiencing a dark night. What would you say to her to give her some hope from an astrological standpoint? I mean, you're not looking at her chart, but it would be helpful if she worked with you. But let's just say in general, those of us feeling what's happening on the planet, what can we look towards to help us get some perspective on this shift?
I think for me, there's two things that come to mind, and there's so many that we could look at. But the first one I would say is your sun. Everybody has a sun. We all have all of the parts, but there's something magical about your sun, which is, this is you. This is your soul. No one else gets to tap into that. There is something that is autonomously you. You are existent as yourself. and you can become your own standard. You can become your own truth. And if we can realize that that is not changing, it is malleable, it's flexible, it's beautiful, but it's solid. And we need to remember that there's something about tapping into our own self-power that can carry us through the dark times. So always find that, whether it's through astrology or through counseling or through meditation or vision quests, whatever it is, find that you and stick with her. And then the other thing I would say is, as a part of that trifecta, is that beautiful Jupiter. It's affecting all of us. And its natural qualities, we like to call it Santa Claus. It's meant to be a gift giver. It's meant to be bright and beautiful and fortunate. And so if we can just tap into that energy, be conscious of its presence, be conscious of the fact that this power is available. It's just a matter of choice. It's just a matter of saying, I choose to see the positive side of the situation. And that's not to spiritual bypass, but it is to say, this is here as much as the dark is. And
just what it's teaching you and how it's expanding you as a soul. That's how I see Jupiter.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I love all that. Anything else? Maybe Mindy, anything you want to leave us with for those suffering out there?
Well, the word that just comes to my mind is hope. And maybe that seems basic, but the hope for those brighter days, hope in one's power. There is so much beauty in each of us, and it isn't to negate those hard times. Those are real. But this is a time of growth, and there are gifts to be found. And I know for myself, for Sarah, and I think for you as well, Cherie, we've been deconstructing, and there's this space between that is a little bit scary, a little gray, where there are those things that you've described, and we're stepping out and we're coming into the unknown, and to be able to go into that, to take hope into the unknown and claim for oneself, to be able to step into your own power. I mean, your word is sovereignty, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're doing. That's what we're working towards.
Yes. And we are each part of the one, the whole, but we play such an integral part. And no matter how seemingly, there's no small part, really. I mean, I have more of a visible, I like to be out there and teaching and whatever, holding a microphone, if you will. But I also recognize that my part is not any bigger than someone who's just lives up in the mountains, with goats or something. I'm just saying, like, we're all contributing to this evolution as humanity, to awaken and to shift the consciousness to love. And I hold sacred that when you talk about hope, Mindy, and you talk about the rebirth, Sarah, and you talk about how we have magic to us, there's our sun and how we shine. And then there's our moon and how we reflect, and where our moons. A lot of people know their sun sign, but they don't know their moon sign. So that's another reason to get your natal chart or your birth chart done. But I look at this reflective parts of me, the more moody aspects in that Gemini. And it's like, okay, well, I can see how that's what moves my being forward, is just sitting with all the different aspects of the up and down and the sideways and underneath, and what is possible in the heavens and what's happening below. And and I love just talking to so many different personalities. That's why I wanted to do this podcast. It's largely interview based. I rarely do solo episodes. And I love just knowing that I just keep coming back to this. There's no right way to be. The only right way to be is to be yourself, and to deconstruct what you've been told you need to be, and just be you.
Yeah.
Your true sovereignty, true soul, true self.
Yeah, Cherie, if I may, you used the word sacred, and that really jumped out to me because this is sacred work. When we step into a chart, you invited us into your sacred self, to the inner workings of your soul. And we don't take that lightly. This is sacred work. And you know this phrase well, as above, so below. Mm-hmm. That's where my heart is to unite that highest self, the true essence of yourself, to bring that outward, to bring it into this world.
Beautiful. Well, you two are definitely doing that. And I just honor you for getting to the heart of this for me. Not only what you shared with me personally before we started recording, but just what you're offering, because souls are starving to know who they are. Yes. Once you get who you are and you embrace it, then I really think that's the hardest thing in life. Don't you guys? Like, I really do.
It is.
To find out who you are. Yeah. And I think it's the grand mystery, because we actually are all part of God. There is God in us. Yeah. And she and he manifest very uniquely and experience themselves through us. And so if we embrace that and know that we are literally, Jesus said it himself, ye are gods and the kingdom of heaven is within you. And he said it in two different places. He taught it in two different places, but everything that I've read about, our true nature as a soul is just, it's so vast. It's huge. Yeah. And so we just chose this one little lifetime to come into this construct of this body, to bring the whole up, to bring everybody else up. And so it really isn't just about us, but when we recognize that we are God-like and that we have very specific pieces to us that are so unique that are needed in this day and time. And what kept coming to me as you guys were talking is that scripture in the Old Testament, when Queen Esther says that you were born for such a time as this. Mm-hmm. She said, I was born. She literally proclaimed it. I was, born for such a time. I love her. I love that archetype. I just love that idea of just this queen going, yep, here I am. And if you look at what is shifting in this world, we literally are in such a pivotal time in history. And I call it her story. Mm-hmm. So most of these Magdalens awakening, these ancient priestesses awakening, these lineages, it's fascinating to me, and it's so diverse. And we need the badass warrior people. We need the docile, sweet people, We need everyone is what I'm saying. So anyway, big rant.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you've read a lot of like the Gnostic Gospels and things like that. Yes. And it is said in many places that the kingdom is not built with hands. It is not buildings. It's within. Mm. So and the whole universe is all within.
That's why they're called the Gnostic text, because gnosis means within, or going within, or direct experience with the divine.
That's right.
Because we are that. And that's what got written right out in the Nicene Creed.
Yep. But we're writing it back in.
A lot of the feminine right along with it. Well, ladies, this has just been epic. So once again, share your website link.
wonderastrology.me.
wonderastrology.me. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. I just love both of you. You're dear to me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, it's brave work to go into what's hidden versus what's handed to you. And as we discussed in this really long episode, which was actually I loved, and we totally lost track of time, but we need to only look within to get through this planetary crisis. when we are awake and we know what is happening, and we can see that everything is in perfect order, things are happening on a timeline and in order, and that as we put ourselves in order, we experience this beautiful, sometimes dark transformation that aligns us with all that is, so that we can show up to be a force for good and help people through this difficult time. And remember, you can find Mindy and Sarah and book a session with them on wonderastrology.me. Have a beautiful week. Remember who you are, and that all is working together for your good. Talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.